folks. It goes way beyond Sidney Powell. I mean, you're going to announce, and Mr. Snerdley, you tell me if you agree with me. I may be a little bit wrong on this. I don't know. You announce why are you smiling? Why? Because you think whenever I allude to the possibility of my being wrong, it's never the case that I'm wrong. Is that what you mean? You call a gigantic press conference like that, one that lasts an hour, and you announce massive bombshells, then you better have some bombshells. There better be something at that press conference other than what we got, such as a hacker who can tell us, yep, everything these guys have said is true. I've looked into it. I've run the software. I've hacked this. I've hacked that. Even put it behind a screen if you want to protect his identity. But you can't. I talked to so many people who were blown away by it, by the very nature of the press conference. They promised blockbuster stuff, and then nothing happened.
I tend to agree with Rush. I mean, it's not a hit to the Rudy and the team. They're working nonstop, 24/7. The evidence is out there. They're pulling this together. They have these affidavits. What I agree about is the structure of it. When you come out and you are dropping bombshells, right, of a mass, I don't want to call it conspiracy, but this thing was very well thought through and dealt with the mail-in ballots. And you say we've got the evidence, I think you have to start putting forward the evidence like you've done in Michigan in a court filing. In addition, Sidney Powell, and remember, I've been saying Sidney Powell to me is a free option, right? You've got a multi-state, 6-state, and you're doing at the legislative level. You're in the courts, both in state court and federal court, and you're going through trying to blow up this process. I think Pennsylvania just announced the Secretary of State has and by the way, Paul Shapiro's Vish, Earth to Vish, have Denver poll Shapiro's. We had that poll before when Shapiro said that when the votes are counted, this is 5 days before the election. When the votes are counted, he's going to win.
Yeah, and mechanically, in addition to the Secretary of State certifying the results, Governor Wolf has put forward the slate of electors for Joe Biden.
Yes, so they're moving down the path. This all can be reversed in court and with the legislature. The legislature still got, remember, the Republican controlled, and that's the thing we should remember. And you're going to have to put pressure on them because a lot of these guys are not going to, you're not going to see profiles in courage. But
they're not just going to not see profiles in courage. A lot of them don't even know that they have this operative power, right, and that they don't know how the process works.
When they don't want the operative power,
of course.
Let's go back. I want to get your assessment of Rush.
I do disagree with Rush.
Okay.
I do disagree with Rush, and not on a substantive level, but rather on a look. These cases take time to put together. The pieces take time to come together, and there's obviously a level of performative art about all of this. I mean, everything you're seeing on CNN and MSNBC all day long is all performance art. So to say, that the lawyers shouldn't get up there and give their own grand idea of what's going on here. Look, the media was heckling and hectoring them. So were the Republicans. Say something, get up there and do something. So they got up there and said something. But anybody who's dealt with this kind of thing knows. I mean, ask Nigel. We should get Nigel Farage on this show. He's gone through these circumstances about how lawsuits work as it pertains to ballots and mail-in ballots and absentee ballots and ballot harvesting. It takes a long time to put this stuff together.
It does. I think, though, and listen, you needed to do a press conference to lay out the battle map, what we do here every day on War Room. They needed to do it in front. It was a forcing function. However, you also, when you go and say, hey, look, Dershowitz did a great job of it on Maria Bartiromo the other day. We played that yesterday, right, in the cold open. But he did a great job in doing that. I think you've got to do that, but you also have to show a little leg. You got to give them. You may not have to give them the definitive because you're still putting it together. But I think you have to directionally say when you get up there, you have to say, look, here's all the math anomalies. I mean, you have a guy like Cortez. Here's the math anomalies. Here's what they mean in these different states. Here's where's the probability zero. And here's a couple of 3 things we've already pulled together. It's not everything. It's not definitive. But it's more than just words. And look, I think really these guys are doing a tremendous job given the pressure they're under. But I can see that what Rush is saying. In addition, and I'm not trying to defend Tucker, and I'm not trying to defend Rush and these people about Sidney Powell, because I think she's a rock star. I've continued to say hers is a free option. What do I mean by that? If you go around and look at the different states, right, you've got activity, and in Wisconsin you're doing an audit right now because their state law is a little different. In Michigan, it's going to be a little different. You can still unwind this and get into it. The court's telling you that. The court's saying, hey, we couldn't give you an injunction to start that process, but there's plenty of time, not unlimited time, but you've got time to come back in here. In Pennsylvania, the exact same thing. The Republican legislatures are asking basically to come up and tell us and show us what you got, right? And if that's good, we'll broaden it out into a broader hearing in front of the state legislature. And we have time because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to approve those electors or put up alternative electors. So in Georgia, a different process. Ducey's, you're thinking about potentially calling the assembly back, the thing in for a special session to get involved. That's all at the state levels. And the reason, why do we have Mike Kelly? Why do we have Kelly's lawyer on here yesterday? Kelly's lawyer, to me, in state court, because he can't get standing in a federal court, but in state court, at least right now, he's arguing what Dershowitz's thing on Maria Bartiromo is very important. Dershowitz showed you two paths to victory. The one path on the due process, he told you, if you've got the receipt, this argument wins, but you have to have the receipts to overturn the 50,000, 52,000 thing. I think that can be delivered. But he said there's another way to argue this. There's a way you don't need any evidence. If you look at this and you look at other states, this was not even close to being constitutional, right? And what Mike Kelly, the congressman, and his lawyer said is that in Pennsylvania, the legislature, as the way the Constitution, they just don't have the right to change election law. You do have to go back and put it to a referendum of the people, which they failed to do. In Georgia, we know they had this consented. They never brought up. The legislature is empowered to do there, but they weren't even cut in the loop. The executive branch totally cut it with a third party. In the lawsuit from the guys at the Thomas More Society, and Phil Klein's a hammer, and he's not a guy to waste time. He's certainly not a guy who's going to waste money. He's sitting there going, hey, they had all these side deals with these public-private partnerships that are nowhere in the state constitutions, and the legislature didn't know anything about it. My point is, you bundle all that up, you listen to Dershowitz, what he's saying. You've got the ability to go across state lines here in a federal lawsuit, because if you look at each one of these 6, I don't know about Nevada, so maybe just 5. But if you look at the rest of them, it looks like as we said, the mail-in ballot thing was just something they thought up. It's Tucker's in plain sight. They did it in plain sight. They changed it in plain sight. What Dershowitz is saying, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. You can change it. It doesn't mean it's legal. It doesn't mean it's constitutional. And what Dershowitz is also implying is you've got 5 textualists, strict constructionists, or however you call it in the legal world. You've got the Federalist Society on steroids with 5, and Roberts is so gutless, he'll go along. If you ever got a shot to win, gentlemen, this is the time you got the shot to win. So what are you doing? My point, this thing is still being fought on multiple battlefronts, but I do agree with the Tuckers and the Rushes to a degree. It's time you got to come forward. The clock is ticking, right? Maybe it's not perfect, but you do have in affidavits. I've kind of seen them. I think they've got thousands of pages of affidavits. You have to collate it. You have to assign it to a case. And I think you start having to push out because Rush and these guys and Tucker, they're looking to be on your side. They're not looking not to be on your side. And I think what he did with Sidney the other day was actually, I didn't have a problem with it because I say she's a free option. Her thing is so complicated, right? To actually get the evidence and go in and show probable cause, because I actually think what she's talking about is a criminal proceeding.
Well, yeah, and it's 2 different objectives. Think about it. Rudy Giuliani's objective is to halt this certification so that we can have clear audits of which votes count and which ones don't. Sidney, I think, is pointing more in a direction that's going to put people in jail.
Here's where there's nations heading. And when Bannon says something like this, he's never wrong. Here's where this is heading. I can see it right now so clearly. That 30% of Democrats right now, without the evidence coming forward, and the evidence is going to be coming forward the next 10 days, 2 weeks. It's going to be a firestorm, what we're going to have. Because, hey, that's not evidence. You're suppressing vote. Boom. You're going to have that. Right now, 67% to 70% of the Trump supporters think this thing was stolen. Okay? That's going to get to 90%. It just will. You're going to get almost half the Democrats go, you know what? It's going to be Tariq. Orange man bad, but this was the finesse. This was the finesse. Because he's a smart guy. This is the finesse. You may, and I'm saying 100% that Trump's going to be his victory is going to be affirmed. However, in that 0.0001%, if he runs at a time, right, to the Electoral College and doesn't get kicked in the House, and Joe Biden, for whatever reason, does with the nation now a big hunk of Democrats and an overwhelming Trump supporters saying, no, this thing was stolen, he's illegal, and he did nothing. He did not lift a finger when it counted to come forward and help solve this. And Sidney Powell keeps down her path, and Sidney Powell comes, and I'm going to pick a random month, like in March, with the receipts. You're going to have a firestorm like you've never seen in this country before. This is why it's so incumbent upon, there's no heat on the Biden thing right now. They're nothing but retreads and clerks that you're putting up because nobody wants to be in your faux administration. Here's why. They understand look, we have a pandemic that triggered a financial crisis, that triggered a capital markets. We're going to show you details of what's happening in Germany now with the mask. This thing's on fire right now. This very uncertain. The financial bottom could fall out of this very easily. Okay? Could fall out of this very easily. The recovery Trump's done has been spectacular, but it could fall out very easily, particularly if you don't keep putting money into the system. And somebody at some point in time is going to say, hey, you could destroy the dollar, you could destroy everything we've got right now. That firestorm on top of blatant illegitimacy and illegality that stole this will cause something beyond a constitutional crisis. It'll cause a societal crisis. And this is what we're besieging. Oh, Bannon's running around. No, I am the peacemaker here, saying because if Biden's campaign, instead of wasting time having press conferences about clerks, Tony Blinken doesn't matter. Jake Sullivan doesn't matter. It's another one of these typical Washington careers clerks, right? Flournoy doesn't matter. Jay Johnson doesn't matter. This is just all you're just recycling stiffs from previous failed administrations. What matters is getting to the truth of what happened here. And if that's not sorted out now, between now and December 14th, this crisis is only going to increase. It's not going to go away. There's no magic solution on December 14th. And this is why it's incumbent upon President Trump and all the sayers around you, just remember, this is for something greater than yourself. This is really your call to greatness right now, to stand up for this republic, right? Because this is a defining moment. In the next 2 weeks are going to be two of the most important weeks in American history. We're going to return. We're going to go through the pandemic. I'm going to get to the sense. I'm going to get off my soapbox. I want to hear what the team thinks. Particularly, I want to show you this footage from Germany. There's stuff happening, ladies and gentlemen. I got to tell you. People are just sitting there going, nah. Until you show me that we got to do it, I ain't going to do it, right? And people are standing up, and they're prepared to get kind of assaulted in doing that. All next on War Room Pandemic, live from the nation's capital.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. I want to put up the, in a second, we're going to put up the German thing in a second, but I want to get back, I want to get Raheem and Jack and Greg into this assessment. How's the posse on the live stream and hashtag War Room Pandemic? I have 100% support on this.
I think it's about 60-40 Aginia.
On what part of it?
On the Russian Tucker stuff. And here's the thing. I don't think it's like a difference necessarily in substance, but it's a difference in style that
like
we're seeing here. Let me go back to something you talked about 15 minutes ago that I never got to respond to, and that's the idea of showing a little leg. I agree. You know, people tell me I show too much leg, but I agree. But what showing a little leg in this sense takes is a communications effort, right? It's somebody who takes the information that Sydney has, packages it up, sells it out there, knows what goes to the social media universe, knows what goes to the TV universe, to the radio universe, and so forth. We don't have that luxury right now, and if you really want to get into why we don't have that luxury, it's because not every Republican in this town is pulling in the same direction. All of these communication staffers at the RNC have been, you know, just quiet and sitting on the terrace at Morton's for the last 2 weeks waiting for us all to blow over. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, I know you said you didn't necessarily have a problem with what Tucker did. I did, but again, not because of the substance of it, but because of the timing of it. It set in play a weekend of kind of infighting and disruption and splitters and people not knowing what the line was supposed to be and where they were supposed to go, who they were supposed to believe, and it wasn't the right time for it. Now, some may say, hey, Tucker doesn't owe Sidney Powell anything, Tucker doesn't owe Donald Trump anything, but no, but he owes his audience something, and his audience do overwhelmingly support those characters. So there's that. And the last thing I noted as well that I wanted to make mention of is you talk about the transition team, right? The Biden transition team, and they're all third tier, fourth tier reruns. Remember, that's because it's and you can use this one, I know you'll like it. That's because it's the transition team. It's not the transition team. Remember, he is the transitional candidate. The people are waiting for Kamala to come along. You have to keep that in mind. You know, you talk about March and what may happen in March with all the evidence. And believe me, as much as the right and as much as everyone in the live chat doesn't want to see his presidency of Joe Biden, neither does the Democratic Party. I mean, they are waiting for Kamala to take that thing. And that's when the real transition begins.
Okay.
I have a little different perspective. I think that there are thoughtful people out there who have seen some of the information on that hard drive. I do not include the irresponsible mainstream media who denied the American people the opportunity to look at that information. I think there are thoughtful Democrats, no matter how far to the left they are or not, who know that this man is going down and everyone around him is going to go down, and the American people are going to see a betrayal that has not been seen on these shores since Benedict Arnold. Literally that bad, people. Everybody who lost loved ones in Vietnam and Korea, you can be rest assured that this man, Joe Biden, his family, his crime family, and his associates are in the back pocket of the Communist Chinese Party. Those are the people who funded the murder of your relatives. This guy cannot stand. He is a communist. I know it's unfashionable to be so strident against these red devils, but this guy is bought and paid for.
Is he a communist or he's just compromised?
No, he is a useful idiot. You know what he is? He's a Judas. He sold us out, and we know what he'll sell out. He sold out a young girl in his own family. He sold out decency to get this election in there. And everybody else around him, including the mainstream media, sold out decency. Your souls are literally clouded.
But but the point, I want to go back to the Tucker and Rush with this point right here. In the hard drive from hell, we had the receipts. We had the wire transfers. We had the signed engagement, and we're going to go back and re-put that out at the appropriate time. He's not president, not going to be president, so we don't think it's the appropriate time quite yet. But I see Rush and Tucker are kind of saying the same thing. When you come out, particularly when the House is against you, 5-7 against, right? When you come out and you're laying out strategy, you do have to show them a little leg. You've got to show them a taste of what you've got. Now, in Michigan, you had evidence, and I think it would have behooved them, even for presentation purposes, to show this. This is what I'm saying. What Cindy's doing, I think, almost verges on a criminal investigation. Yeah. And so it's tough for her to do that as an independent, researcher and lawyer. But I see where some of the frustration is. Particularly, remember, Tucker's getting it from the Murdochs. He's getting it from the top down. We called this. It's over. I love Laura Ingraham. She's a colleague, a friend. She's been here many times. Every time we had an important dinner, she was there next to Nigel, next to Fraud. The thing we had when for CPAC last year, we had the big dinner at the Hay Adams Hotel. She was one of the key people that came. But last night, she totally punched out. It's over. Let's move on to the next topic, right? Let's move on to the getting the House back and saving these Senate seats.
The thing about evidence, too, is there's a place and a role for evidence to be presented. That is inside of a courtroom. Rudy Giuliani is defending the President of the United States. Sidney is trying to uncover serious criminal behavior. And it behooves them to keep some of this information close to the vest because they do not want people to know what their game plan is.
1,000%.
We have to have trust.
Well, hang on. They do want people to know what the game plan is. The whole purpose the other day was to walk through the strategy. I 100% agree. You don't argue this in the court of public opinion right now. But just remember, the court of public opinion does have a say-so here. I'm not saying laying out all the evidence. I know that you're getting very little sleep at night because you're a math guy and you're working through the math of the stuff and taking it from these anomalies down to actually the connective tissue of what went on. You don't need to go into details, but I know it's happening. However, all I'm saying is that if you had some of the math tied to a few of the receipts, and you had these because Coleman's in state court last week with this evidence. He hasn't added one affidavit to when he first went in. The one that yesterday the justices said that I do think, and this is why I'm saying those guys are kind of right, I think you just show a little bit of that leg, and hey, we're not going to show you everything. This is the kind of stuff you have. Plus, you force the media to confront one thing they would have to confront. They're hectoring of you. You have no evidence. Show us the evidence. You have evidence. In Coleman, in Michigan, you have a lot of evidence, right? And particularly in Wayne County, you're going to have more evidence as you're coming up now with this. That is a connective tissue from the anomalies on the math to actually connects down to how did this happen? How did they get these phony votes? What happened? That's all to come. But I think so for the audience, we're hardcore in this for the fight. But I do understand in the coalition that we've got, some coalition members are saying, "Hey, where's the beef? You got to show me the beef." And Sidney. Look, I'm the number one guy said the CCP is in back of this. Their hands are all over this thing. It's going to be proven. But when you throw out just the way the media is, particularly with how they trashed McCarthy and how they lied and withheld the real communists that were in our government in the 40s and the 50s, it did so much damage, right? Naturally, the knee-jerk reaction is that, oh, this is McCarthyite, you don't have it. When you bring up a communist conspiracy, and you just brought it up right then, when you bring up a communist conspiracy, you got to bring it. You got to bring the detail. And I know we're going to get there, etc.
Well, hang on though. Look, Tucker is beloved the right over, and with lots and lots of reasons. I consider him to be one of the people who I've watched and learned from for years. And nobody has done more for this movement in a media sense than Rush Limbaugh. Okay, let's just get that on the record, and then the but. And the but is they can ask for receipts and say, hey, where's the evidence, and bemoan the fact that they haven't been provided the evidence. But remember, I understand there was the Bobulinski thing, but where was the day-to-day reporting on the hard drive from hell on Tucker's show? That it didn't exist. Every single story we broke down, every single email we released, every single image that went out there, they had the receipts.
He did do Bobulinski.
He did Bobulinski. That's one contingent part of it.
But Bob, okay, just to talk the way the world works, doing Bobulinski is a profile in courage.
I understand.
Because number one, you don't have a ton of time to check the guy out. You're doing it on the fly. Yep. It's kind of like the post with the hard drive. They're doing it, and they're doing it as thoroughly as they can, but they are under time pressure.
Yep.
If Bobulinski had turned out to have one iota, it's the end of Tucker Carlson's career.
Agree.
So just for doing that shows you a profile. And the audience got to understand
this. There are 50,000 other emails that we published.
While we're trying to rate what the live stream thinks, Steve, I would say you have much more support than Tucker Carlson. Every third one.
That doesn't matter.
This is the problem. People are feeling betrayed.
Hang on.
If you're going to be in the fight, be in the fight.
I know it, but I think people also have to take a broader perspective. Listen, we're a coalition, right? And you got to understand, particularly people who are sitting there dumping on Fox. I've said from day one, I'm not going to pat you on the head about Fox. The Murdochs are business guys, and they're smart business guys, and they see a huge opening. They see, and they don't owe you anything. And people say, well, I defended Fox for years. You didn't have to defend Fox. They were making a business decision because they were making plenty of money at that time. They're making a cold, calculated business decision.
And news is a marketplace.
News is a marketplace.
And people can choose to get their news in a different source.
We're not saying you should.
That's
come
why
to
we have such a great audience, and
Yes.
that's why every third comment is
By the
Tucker.
way, by the way, also remember, we're just conduits for this. It's the audience, and I want to go back in the few seconds we got. By the way, we're going to have Darren Beattie on here as a surprise guest because Montgomery County thing's blowing up. You talk about evidence, you talk about receipts, you talk about what's going on. In the whole thing of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is still central to this, this analysis that was done in Montgomery County is key, and he did a second part of the story that actually showed how it went down. We're going to have Darren on here from Revolver News. And Revolver News has been relentless in this. I mean, they've put up everything that's out there of relevance in this entire fight. Okay, this is a, by the way, it feels like Thanksgiving dinner around the table, right? This is what's so great. And it's being driven by the, and I'm not responding to the live stream. It's very important, though. The live stream is...
No, but they're in the room.
No, they're definitely in the room. That, to me, is important because that's where the community's going, and this is about a community. Hey, the guys in Michigan and thing, they don't fear us. They fear that community, okay? We're going to take a short break. Darren Beattie next.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
Yeah.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Where in the heck is Jack Maxwell?
We lost one.
We lost Jack. Jack's been working. So I got to tell folks that you're going to see in the next couple of days. Jack is a reverted back to his finance days. He's so in these numbers. He's sleeping like 2 hours a night. But there'll be a lot of assessment of that, analysis of that coming out of the next.
I
couple
like
days.
this better. This is less likely to cough on me.
Or to get spit the tobacco on you. Okay, we're going to bring in now. I think that was a good conversation.
That was a good conversation.
Good conversation. Okay.
It felt cathartic.
Yes. Okay, we're going to bring in now Darren Beattie. Darren, there's a lot of controversy. People up in Pennsylvania are either saying, hey, I don't know if they got the numbers right, but I think it was even the second part of your two-part analysis of actually what happened in Montgomery County that people are also questioning. We didn't have a chance to get to on the show yesterday, but we'd love to do it today. Could you go back, for our audience members that may not saw it, had a chance to review it, summarize what your first part said about the math, and then go into what this explosive part two was about how they actually did the finesse.
Okay, so this whole study arose from a glaring anomaly in the numbers themselves, and it follows this pattern that we've seen in a lot of these key areas where Trump has a lead, there's a curious suspension of counting, and then in the dead of night, all of a sudden you have a spike in votes for Biden that ends up in Biden taking the lead or in dramatically winning Trump's lead. And so the first piece that we have is at revolver.news. It's called New Data from Rigorous Statistical Analysis Points to Voter Fraud in Montgomery County. And the anomaly that started this whole thing is that at 9 a.m., November 5th, there's a batch of 90,000 mail absentee votes that get added, and the total votes only go up by 9,500. And that's a weird thing because it implies that in-person votes went down by 80,400 and some change. And that's certainly an error. So, there's no dispute, as I was saying yesterday, that there's some kind of error involved. The question is only whether this was an innocent accidental error or whether it was malicious and fraudulent. And the piece goes through kind of step by step why it thinks that this was fraudulent. And as I mentioned, it rules out the possibility that this was just one error on the numbers of one candidate, because there are actually three candidates, including the Libertarian. And when you do pairwise comparisons of the numbers, all of the pairwise comparisons are anomalous. I mentioned that, in fact, with the Libertarian candidate in the mix, the Libertarian candidate receives 20% of the vote relative to Trump, which would make this county the second most Libertarian county in the country, which is bizarre, but it's entirely consistent with the fraudulent explanation, which is increasing the share of libertarian votes is a way to kind of keep Biden's numbers in more or less realistic spheres, not project him to Saddam Hussein level numbers, while also preventing Trump from getting more. So that's consistent with fraud. And also, people could say, well, the actual numbers are wrong because the numbers are coming from New York Times and a company called Edison, which is used by basically everyone. But the study also cross-references data from the county and New York Times and finds on multiple dimensions that those numbers themselves track. And so basically what the study does, it structures to say there's this really weird anomaly that's like a version of this spike situation where you have Trump ahead, spike for Biden in the middle of the night, but on steroids with additional anomalous features. And we take that as a given. There's weird stuff going on here, and we kind of look at the numbers and rule out a series of innocent explanations leading to the most likely explanation, which is fraudulent. And in this second piece, the first piece is more kind of numbers-oriented, more statistics-oriented. The second piece, actually, that you can go to revolver.news now and read it, it's called Statistical Analyst Reveals Scenario of How Dems May Have Pulled Off Massive Fraud in Montgomery County. It's the pinned story, so you go on revolver.news, you can follow it with me now. But this is more of a narrative explanation to enhance people's intuitions as to exactly what may have transpired in a way that's consistent with the kind of suspicious numbers outlined in the first piece.
So can you take a second and just walk through how it happened, or how you guys are proposing it happen?
Right. So basically, the bare bones of it is this, and again, this is speculative, but it's a narrative that tracks what's suggested in the first piece, and I think it's actually highly plausible here. And so the first weird thing is that there's this press conference. We don't really think of those. Why would you hold a press conference announcing an approximate number of mails you've collected but not counted? Like, why don't you just count? Why do you name what you've collected and then just suspend counting in this incredibly bizarre fashion? Well, you can do this because it gives you time to say, okay, we need to figure out exactly how many ballots we need by looking at the in-person returns. And then we have this whole batch of mail-ins that we haven't counted yet. And once we know exactly how many we need, we can, play games with the mail-ins in order to make up the difference. And that's basically what looks like what happened here, with a few twists. So one of the anomalies mentioned in the first piece was there's this huge decrease in in-person ballots. Now, I've gotten feedback from some people saying your numbers on these in-person ballots that were decreased must be wrong. You must have said it must have been a typo, because we said those in-person ballots that were removed were actually like North Korea level numbers in favor of Biden. People thought, oh, they must have been Trump, because if these people are trying to pull off a fraud against Trump, why would they remove 80,000 some in-person ballots that allegedly have Biden up at like 98%, something like that? Well, this piece gives the explanation is that likely those ballots were part of an initial kind of fraud, that people actually got the fraud wrong and didn't quite get, okay, we're sort of capped. We've announced publicly how many in-persons we have, and so they can't dramatically exceed that without looking weird. So they ended up having to shuffle a bunch of in-persons to mail-ins, and mail-ins are actually much easier to screw around with anyway. And so the switch was switching from these in-person ballots to mail-in ballots, and the counting scheme was such that they were able to make up the votes over time. And so it was basically, the numbers looked so weird because it was a fraud, but there were like it was an incompetent fraud, so they make mistakes in the beginning and kind of corrected that initial mistake by trying to do frauds with in-person ballots and switching those to mail-in ballots.
In your mind,
So like in the grand contest as to whether, was this actually fraud and corruption, or do these anomalous numbers simply represent the profound incompetence of the people tasked with counting votes and securing our elections? The beautiful thing about this is that it actually indicates that it's probably both. It's not. It's a fraud and incompetence. It's an incompetent fraud.
Tucker last night said this all happened in plain sight, and we knew this was going to happen. Do you agree with that? And if so, what do you mean by in plain sight?
I mean, I can't. I think that any reasonable person could have anticipated, with unprecedented numbers of mail-in ballots coming in, that there would be a lot of things like this. And so in that spirit, I basically agree with Tucker's comment. And frankly, I think the implication of that is far more damning to the Republican side than the Democrat side, because I think any reasonable person, Revolver had been anticipating this for months in the form of its color revolution thesis, which involves as one of its characteristics these bizarre contested election scenarios, which were guaranteed to happen with this massive mail-in voting. And so I think it's damning in many ways on the Republican side for not being better prepared for these things that I think any reasonable person could have anticipated.
Right now, I think there's some thinking and talk, and I think you'll probably see this, that there could be a multi-state, going forward with a multi-state suit that takes the Kelly suit in Pennsylvania. This was not constitutional and didn't have, in particularly in Pennsylvania, you didn't go to the people and get their concurrence with this, right? The state legislature it doesn't have the power. You've got to actually go out with a referendum. And there's different aspects, and the unconstitutionality of this whole mail-in votes in the specificity of each state. Do you agree with that? Do you think that we're beyond the evidence now, or beyond things like yours, as you tie it back to actual voter rolls, and people I know are doing this right now? You come forth with that evidence to back up the Rudy Giuliani's individual suits in different states, whether it's Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, is going to be overridden by a more macro, where people are just going to sit there and go, hey, Dershowitz is right. This thing is so unconstitutional. It just got to be shut down. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm not a legal expert. I can't speak to the legal strategy or what I predict on the court side. I support any effort to get these irregularities addressed in courts. What I've been advocating from the beginning, and what Revolver.news has come up with, very forceful pieces on this, noting that the state legislators can seat whatever electors they want, but it looks like on the state side, unfortunately, they're not really. There's really no fight in there, which is very disappointing, because the state legislators, if they saw this evidence of fraud, they have full authority under the Constitution to seat pro-Trump electors who will vote for Trump in the Electoral College next month.
If that evidence starts coming forward in the next 2, 3, 4 days, do you think that could change the legislatures? Because right now you're seeing a number of presentations calling back special sessions that's really focused on that. Do you think if they actually saw the receipts, they saw things that connected the theoretical you had with actual how it was actually implemented, do you think that will change their mind, or at least give them help steel their backbone, because now they've got things they can actually point to and touch and feel?
Indirectly, yes. And again, it depends how compelling the evidence is. But I think ultimately the evidence is mostly effective indirectly insofar as it can galvanize public opinion. And public opinion is the instrument of pressure that I think is more relevant to these figures in the state legislatures. And so it's just, again, it's this perennial question of, are they more terrified of the people, or are they more terrified of whatever kind of establishment interests are countervailing the people and pushing on the other side? And unfortunately, at this stage, it looks like they're not too scared of the people. But maybe that can change as public opinion changes, not only on the basis of evidence, but on the basis of the presentation of the evidence.
Darren, we got to bounce. We'll get your social media and the link to Revolver up in the next segment. Darren Beattie from Revolver. Incredibly powerful reporting. Go to revolver.news.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, what we try to do here is try to highlight those news sites you should be going to, revolver.com, revolver.news. It's been overwhelmed. And one of the things I really like when we have guests on here and people, they get back to me and they go, man, your audience is so intense. I've gotten 1,000 new Twitter followers, people going to my site. We've got great news here on, by the way, we're over 20 million downloads, one of the biggest podcasts in the world, biggest podcast in the nation, all categories, right? We just passed a big mile marker here in the YouTube subscribers.
We did. We just passed 250,000 YouTube subscribers. I still remember the days when we were screaming for 100. So thank you.
And you get millions of views on these things. The show's blowing up all over, and the reason is we're trying to present information, news, and access to other people that are pertinent to right now for you, making up your mind about your personal life, your professional life, what you're doing. We're going to show some. If we can show, we got the footage up there of Germany. There's Germany. I got to tell you, this thing on the pandemic and the response to the pandemic, instead of targeted interventions, these kind of mass interventions are not playing well in certain parts of the world that are not being reported. Jack Maxey, what are you seeing in Germany?
And they're not playing well, people, because humans have eyes and ears, and we can see and understand things. And everybody looking at this can understand that this is not the crisis that has been painted to be. And now you're seeing German citizens of all political stripes, all ends of the political spectrum, and they are in the streets. Why? Because they want their freedom back. They want their lives back. They want to go on with their jobs and their futures and their dreams. And the entire world feels the same way. So as we go forward, I want you to be just like these German people and remember who it is who did this to you. The Communist Chinese Party in China for releasing this deadly virus, and then your progressive leadership that continues to want to put you on your knees when you have the right to live free.
It is, but you just said it's a deadly virus. I know a guy that you know. I haven't told you this, but he came close to death by getting this in the last 3 weeks. Had to be hospitalized, and they used a new oxygen alternative to the ventilator, which, by the way, the ventilators, they do realize now, just ripped your lungs apart. So
80% of the people who go on a ventilator, even without COVID, don't come off ventilators.
Right.
So ventilators are pretty much your last ride in the saddle.
Okay, I want to turn now to another site. Frank Walker of Cannon 212 is another site you got to go to every day. He's got a great thing. Back right before the Trump's as you've heard me say many times, right before the inauguration, she went to Davos at the World Economic Forum. They meet once a year in January. He gave a speech about globalization and how that was the future, done so great for mankind, and said the only problem we have is these populists and these nationalists. And so now his wingman, the guy that has a secret deal with him, Pope Francis, has come out with a new book, Let Us Dream. It's going to be in the shelves 1 December. Let Us Dream. He wrote this during the CCP virus when he was being isolated. And his number one enemy in the world? Populist. Frank Walker from Cannon 212. If you don't go there, you got to. It's another great site. Heavy with Catholic, traditional Catholic information.
Look at the title of the book. This is the Pope's book. It's called Let Us Dream. Is that correct?
Yeah.
This is a man who is supposed to provide all of us with the certitude of our faith, and he is dreaming about what's coming next. Thank you very much.
Something weird about these judges. Frank, tell us about this book, and why does he say populists, and particularly President Trump's populists, are the biggest single problem in the world?
Well, I think at the basic level, thanks for having me on here. My readers are big fans of becoming bigger fans of your site, so thank you. They're learning how to fight, I think. But Francis hates populists because they're Catholic. That's the most, you don't have to be Catholic to be a populist, but the people that are protesting the lockdowns are the ones that are tired of not having the Mass. They want the sacraments. They believe in their freedom. I've noticed that the more faithful Catholics are less and less fooled by this scamdemic. So I think that just like Chairman Xi, Francis sees who his enemy is, and his greatest enemy, the one he's most insulting about, are faithful Catholics.
One of the things that the media has picked up on, Frank, is that he basically implies, and I mean, just almost says it. That he does say it, but he implies that Trump's rallies are basically fascist, neo-Nazi, and that Trump is like Hitler in how he's pulled this movement together.
Yes, and he's done that before. Before the lockdowns, before the scamdemic, he was calling us Nazis. He was calling populist Nazis. Today he calls them hypocrites, people who are only superficially religious, who are ignorant, and then always we're afraid. We're afraid of these imagined enemies. And then somebody like Trump is just whipping people up like Hitler. We're just sheep and we're all being fooled. Pope Francis.
What is his, before we let you go,
he said,
why is he particular? What has he got against populism? What does he have against populists, particularly since so many of these populists are observant Catholics?
Well, I think that Francis's religion is not really Catholicism. Archbishop Vigno called him sort of the oracle of globalism. So he sees his enemies are the same as the globalists, and his religion is, and Catholicism has to be neutralized in order for them to achieve their goals. And he calls populists rigid. He says even Catholics are part of populists, and we're like as if Jesus was rigid or something, and we need to be more loose in our morals. And I think that he just sees this as an obstacle because, after all, he's trying to change the church into something completely different.
Frank, how do people get to your site and how they find you on social media?
Canon 212 at one N is my site, Canon 212 also on Twitter, and I have a daily video update on YouTube at Canon 212.
Canon 212. Frank Walker, thank you very much for joining us. Great readership over there. Everybody should go. Even if you're not a Catholic, you'll see a lot of things that tie together the globalist agenda, and that's what this is about, is nationalist, I think Tucker, nationalistic populist, or John Kerry, nationalistic populism versus globalism. That's why it's not Democrat and Republican. It's nationalistic populism versus the globalists. Yes, sir.
And
Mr.
also,
Jack
when you
Maxson.
look at the Catholic Church, you had yesterday, he met with the NBA, and they've just announced that there will be no Christmas celebration. None of the normal things that we would have, Advent, Christmas liturgies, etc., are not going to be performed by this Pope this year because of our own safety.
No Christmas.
What a brave, courageous man of faith.
No Christmas from the Pope. Okay, we're going to be back at 5 o'clock. There's going to be a lot breaking today. I think additional lawsuits, more evidence coming out, more updates on the state legislatures, the certification process. Remember, 2 of the most important weeks in American history is going to go right through Thanksgiving. We're also going to have a lot to say about those who started it all, the Pilgrims, all at 5 o'clock. See you then.